Another week down in the AHL. Plenty to talk about going on this week in the league. Games, management, players moving. Lots going on, as always, in the first couple of weeks of the LG AHL PSN League. Hi, everyone. T-Sibs with you. Broski, MGM on board as well. And we have plenty to talk about in what was week number 2 and how things have changed in the standings and how players have changed. Come and gone. Plenty of trades to talk about, and some of the bigger trades we'll highlight as we talk a little bit more about all the moves that went on this week in the AHL. It is, again, T-Sibs with you, and on the Skype chat, Broski, our Tucson GM, and GM over on the Stockton side is MGML. And gentlemen, welcome to week number 2, and seemingly a long week with the amount of stuff that's gone on, and we're going to get to all of it real soon. But it seems like an awful lot went on, and above all the other things that we're going to talk about, you guys have to, as GMs, worry about where your team's going and what what do you have to do to get there. We'll start with you, MGM. Week number 2, you come out of this week, and again, you see a lot of movement going on amongst teams. How do you feel about it this early in the season? People say 9 weeks, it's quick, goes quickly, so that you've got to be able to say, hey, I've got to do something now. If it's not clicking, I've got to fix it now, or we could be done real quickly. Or how much patience do you think you need to have at this point?
I think you have to have a certain amount of patience. You can't jump the gun too much, but on the same breath, you can't, like you say, 9 weeks goes by very quickly, and if things aren't clicking, you can't wait for things to happen. So, I've already made quite a few trades in the first couple weeks, trying to get lines some better chemistry, and we'll see. We kept our head above water this week, but I'm hoping we have a bit of a bounce back week next week.
Broski, again, I know that you you may have pulled out what was left of whatever hair you had after this week. All sorts of stuff going on with, can you make these deals? Can you not make these deals? Is somebody an RA? Are they not an RA? And again, rules are relatively clear, but sometimes the designations of players aren't. But how do you feel about what you need to do at this point of the season? Obviously, you're not afraid of making trades or moving guys around, but how much is too much for a GM to do at this point?
Well, I don't think there really isn't a limit. If you feel like your team's not doing what you believe they can do, and you know there's those players that you feel aren't gonna really match up well within the next week or two, because we're starting week 3, week 2.
Week 3.
One of those 2 weeks, anyways. It's been hectic week lately, and you gotta do what your team can do, and you really want to you want to get up there in the leaderboards, you want to get up there in the standings, and you want playoffs to come, and you want to be be up there instead of being up there at the bottom and having to face the tougher teams, But it's way too early to start talking about playoffs. But for trading and stuff, I feel like you got to do what you got to do. You got to do what you need to do to win games. And if you feel somebody's not fitting in, then I feel like trading's the best way to do it.
Well, we're going to talk about trades galore as usual at this point of the season. We're also going to talk about recent patches and the tuner that came out late in this week, and whether or not we really feel that's done much of anything. If you're on our YouTube channel and you're in the chat, please go ahead and give us your thoughts about the tuner that came out, and also the quote-unquote fix of the stick lift and how you feel about it. We'll try and get those comments on there as well. We're going to talk a little bit about, obviously, some of the teams, including the formerly 9-0 Wolves after the first week, and how they were able to come back down to earth this week at a 4-5 record, and take a look at least one of the games that they played this week against the Thunderbirds and how that worked out. And what some of my observations were of that game. But one other thing that we're going to talk about, and a lot of chat that obviously a lot of you folks aren't privy to as part of if you're not part of AHL management, but a lot of talk this week about what kind of ability GMs and AGMs on the AHL side have. How much does their NHL counterparts, how much do they get involved in what happens to the AHL team? Do they get involved enough where they're helpful and give constructive criticism? Do they totally take a hands-off approach, or do they do pretty much everything? And we'll get into that a little bit because it certainly was talked about a lot this week, especially with a couple of things that happened in on a couple of teams with management this week. So we'll get to that, and then as we're finishing up or getting into that topic, we're going to talk to an old buddy of ours, Miranda Conda, who is the GM over for the Arizona Coyotes, and certainly a guy that we know well. And the reason that I want to bring him on is to talk about two things. One, his first season in the NHL and what it's meant to him, and what he's experienced as opposed to what he sees in the AHL, and to also talk towards what he does and what his philosophy is with this AHL team, because I think it's incredibly important to hear from someone who's been both AHL and NHL management, and who I think is pretty fair about letting their AHL guys go and do what they need to do. And so we'll get to talking with them a little bit about that. But first and foremost, let's take a very quick look at the standings. We mentioned the Springfield Thunderbirds, and they had a heck of a game earlier this week against the Wolves and beat them, and we're going to talk a little bit about that game. But right now, Springfield on top of the Eastern Atlantic at 25 points, 12 wins. It's Hershey, Providence coming up, and then Bridgeport, Lehigh, the Penguins, and Hartford trailing Springfield on a 4-game winning streak so far. We also have in the East North, Syracuse is topping that division with 13 wins, 27 points. Then you've got Utica, Albany, Toronto, St. John's, Rochester, and Binghamton. Syracuse on a 7-win streak, 7-2-1 in their last 10 games, as you can see. And they are a team we'll talk a little bit about today, as a team that obviously is pretty hot and doing incredibly well in the East North. West Central has Rockford still on top, 6-game winning streak, 15 wins total, 30 points. Chicago now 4 back on them in points. The Iowa Wild still playing fairly well, and we ran into them on Thursday, and we saw just how talented that team is. Cleveland still above 500 in 4th place. Then Milwaukee, Manitoba, Charlotte, who made a trade that I think is going to improve them a little bit, and we'll talk about that in a little while. And then Grand Rapids bringing up the Western. Bringing up the Western Central. In the Western Pacific, it is San Diego on top, tied with Texas. San Antonio a point back. Bakersfield 2 points back. And then Tucson, who are now 6 points back of the lead. Stockton right below them, Ontario, and then San Jose, who Tucson is going to play tonight in the 9:30 game. Having a rough go of it right now, 7 losses in a row. Obviously, you see quite a few teams in this division who have had a little bit of a losing streak. San Antonio playing well, and again, we'll talk about that team and the fact that they're on an 8-1-1 run and how their goaltending's been doing so far this season for them, and that'll be part of the player discussion that we have a little bit later. But I go back to you guys, and let's just talk in general about the teams. Again, we just spoke about the Rampage being on a rampage, 8-1-1. Texas, certainly shouldn't be out of that discussion at 7-3. San Diego 7-2-1, but the San Antonio Rampage have put on a nice win streak here, and I think there are a number of factors. I'm going to talk a little bit later about their goaltending and how well they've played, but they seem to have found something that has given them an interesting week too, and gotten them right back into this race. Are any other teams that we should hit upon besides Chicago, who we'll talk about in a little bit, or any other teams that surprised you this week in how they fared and good or bad how they wound up playing this week? I think Lehigh's another team, 6 losses in a row. I expected, after coming off that 11-0 victory over the Wolves, I expected better things out of them this week, and yet they're on a losing streak. Anybody surprise you this week as far as teams are going?
Charlotte Checkers. I think they after going without a win in the first week to come out and go 6-3. That's a big turnaround for sure.
Yeah, the only surprise that I saw out there was the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. I definitely thought they were going to have a better week than what they did. I mean, who knows? Maybe they were facing tougher opponents. I never really checked out who they all faced this past week, but I definitely expected them to win a few more games than they did. But I mean, everybody has a slump week, and I'm sure they'll come back from it this upcoming week. They look like a pretty solid team still, so we'll see how that goes. Other than that, everybody else is playing how I'd expect them to play. Besides the Rampage, I was very, very surprised to see them climb that quick, that fast. It just goes to show you, like, no team's really out of it at this point in the season. Like, last week, I believe they were, like, 14th,
Yeah.
and now they're third. Like,
Right.
It takes no time to come back. I mean, the Rampage are a perfect example of that. Like, 1 week you're out of it, the next week you're right back in race, playoff contending team,
And I
That's
have to imagine a lot of the turnover that we're seeing too is going to play a factor in it as the next couple of weeks go by. You're going to see these dips and dives, I think, because even if you're making a really good trade, changing the chemistry of your team, MGM has to, even if they're really good players you're bringing in, they've got to get used to playing with each other. You may have a game or two where they struggle to figure out where each other is on the ice before they really start to click.
Exactly, and I think that's where my team had some growing pains this week. We made quite a few trades last weekend, and it took a couple games where we had some close ones, but I think chemistry definitely lost us a few games this week, and hopefully now that they've had a week to play with each other, we'll pick things back up.
So let's talk a little bit about the Chicago Wolves. Going 9-0 last week, and now after week 2, going 4-5 this week, they are now at a 13-5 record, still doing well. But had a tougher week this week. They wound up struggling with a few teams, and we like I mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about the Springfield game. But they definitely had some tough ones this week, losing to the Penguins 4-3, to the Bruins 4-3, Springfield 6-5. I mean, losing a couple of 1-goal games, certainly nothing to be upset about. But they started off the week with 2 wins over the shutting out both the Wolfpack and the Sound Tigers. Then get trounced by the Phantoms on Monday, and that's when things started to change. And first, let me just ask you this, Broski. You're doing so well. You're undefeated. You go up against a team that blanks you 11-0. How much of that winds up being a psychological blow to the team in general?
I mean, this happened to my team in season 1, but let's not talk about that. Anyways, honestly, I think maybe going into a game, you're facing a team that on paper you shouldn't struggle with. But if you look at their team on paper, you don't know. I mean, a lot of people don't know players on other teams, and I think maybe that's what happened. The Wolves came into the game maybe a little bit too cocky, or maybe a little bit had their heads above the water too much. Maybe they should have been a little bit more prepared. Maybe they were a little unprepared, or maybe Lehigh just played their game very well. We don't know. I mean, it could have went either way.
MG, what do you how much does a big loss like that, after going undefeated and having that string broken by an 11-0 shutout, how much does that play into the next couple of games? I guess maybe if it's the same players, it certainly plays a lot into it, but does it really how does it affect the rest of the team, guys who didn't play that game?
I suppose which lines were playing that game would also make a difference. I mean,
Right.
If it's your top line that you've thrown out against them and you get shut out like that, then I think that could be a pretty crippling blow to any team's confidence. But I mean, they didn't they had a bit of a rough week, but I mean they still kept their heads above water. So I'm sure they're able to shake it off and move on from it.
So from there, they lose 5 in a row, including that loss to Springfield, and we'll talk about that because I think that might have also then become a bit of a turnaround for them. They had an interesting game with the Thunderbirds on Wednesday night, which they lost 6-5, and I took a look at that game, and it was interesting game because both these teams were up and down the ice. A good typical NHL 17 fast-paced game. Thunderbirds were using a dump and chase a lot in the first period. Got away from it a little bit. Uh, they passed the puck really well. The Wolves D was taking chances in the offensive zone. They weren't positioning great. And what wound up happening was after being tied 2-2 in that game, the Thunderbird D started to get caught trailing a play, giving the Wolves opportunities. The Wolves attacked. They weren't. They were attacking offensively, weren't keeping tabs on some of the guys on the Thunderbirds, and then wound up getting caught on a breakaway goal and a couple of goals that were just odd man rushes. The Wolves came back in this game. Actually, were up uh, 5-4 in this one before two late goals by the Thunderbirds gave them the victory. Very late goals, and so I think the Wolves seemingly lost a couple of. At least 3 out of the 5 losses were one-goal games, and I'm wondering if now some of the teams are starting to figure them out. It looked like they had a bit of a defensive issue where it looked like forwards weren't necessarily getting back all the time. Defenders were a little bit out of position, and I think maybe they have tried to address that with some of the trades and moves they made today, and they're trying to acquire some defensemen, hopefully to help them out. So, from what I can see from the Wolves, I don't know if they, you know, had any kind of breakdown in talent at all. I just think maybe some teams figure them out a little bit, but sometimes the run and gun game can really help mow over teams, but sometimes it can really be detrimental if you're going up and down the ice that quickly. And sometimes, if your defenders are coming in deep with you in the offensive zone, you get caught back. And I think a couple of times, certainly in that Springfield game, that's what I saw. Um, I don't know who's gotten a chance to play against the Wolves this season, but they have a lot of talent on their team. The question is, can they get their defense a little bit more shored up? I think is what I see with them. They can go far, but from the losses that I watched and some of the stats that I looked at, it seems like to me, we'll start with you, Broski. It seems to me like the Wolves are looking to maybe shore up their defense because that might be the weak link in their squad.
I'd have to agree with you. I think especially seeing a lot of changes on the Chicago Wolves in the past week in the trades. I mean, they did make a few changes. They got in a few new defenders like TKD Awesome and Recon Monster and the Killer, and those 3 defenders are definitely solid defenders. I definitely think that's what they were trying to do. More so, I mean, up and down, you look at their offense, and they're definitely not struggling their offense at all. You can tell every player is putting in his points per game, and it's more so a defensive problem. You can kind of tell by how the game's been played. Goal for goal games. I don't know if 6-5, 4-3 games are called shootouts still in this game. I mean, I don't know if we're that far into the season yet to find out really if shootout games are above a certain amount of goals. But
Right.
I definitely think it was their defense that was struggling the most. But I think this week might be a brighter week for the Wolves, especially with their 3 new defensive pickups. I think they're going to do well for the team.
MG, you notice anything about this Chicago team that stands out to you, and especially when it comes to a lot of movement of players? Do you think that they're realizing that defense is something that they have to work on, considering the moves that they have made to pick up TK, who we know is a pretty decent defender, and a couple of other guys that they've picked up this week on trades or on the waiver wire? Does it seem like they kind of understand that might be their deficiency?
I would think so, especially when you look at the the one goal game losses. Those are pretty tough, especially in that Thunderbirds game when they're up late in the game and can't shut it out, can't close it down. I think you have to look at your defense at that point and maybe having you can have good offensive defensemen that maybe put up the points, but if they can't shut it down and keep the goals out of the back of your net, maybe it's time for a change.
Well, I think I think in the end, as you guys say, Chicago had a couple of tough games. Starting out that losing streak with an 11-goal loss is brutal. Um, but they seem to push through that losing streak, won their last two, and with some defensive changes, I think are looking to try and shore things up so they can get back on track again. Still, again, as we mentioned, still they're still doing well. 13-5 is certainly a good place to be. However you get there, certainly a nice record to have in that Western Central, with Rockford now 4 points above them and playing incredibly well. They're able to stick with the Ice Hogs and stay ahead of everybody else right now in that division. So they're still in good shape, and we'll see what kind of situation happens now with the changes that they've made. Let's move on to some of the specific performers of the week, and let's go backwards. I'll start with the goaltenders this week. There are a couple of guys I want to mention, and somewhat because of what transpired this week with these teams. Well, we've been talking about the Wolves. Well, I want to talk about Trip 23, who played 2 games, had 2 shutouts on 19 saves, and by all accounts had a tremendous week. He is 5-0 with a 1.2 goals against on the season. He started out with St. Louis, who won him in bidding, and wound up down here in the NHL. Now, Tripp on Friday traded to the Checkers, and so I know MGM mentioned a little bit about about what Charlotte's doing and moving things around, trying to improve their team, picking up Tripp in this trade with the Wolves. An interesting trade of the Checkers sending Trap House legend Miffy LaVenture to the Wolves for Tripp, Travis Dorcas, Jimbo Slice, Sandman, and Todd. And I think Tripp and Jimbo Slice, certainly 2 names that are fairly well known. And I liked Jimbo's game as we watched in that Springfield game. But I want to talk a little bit about the Checkers, MGM, and picking up Tripp and what that's going to mean for them. Again, here's a guy who's done well so far for the Wolves, and apparently, obviously, they certainly can afford to send that guy away for some talent. I think it's a good move for the Wolves, and I'm assuming this is going to help the Checkers out in the long run.
I think so. I mean, a good goaltender can steal you quite a few games, and Tripp, although he doesn't have a ton of games to kind of really show that he's a super strong goaltender. The short games or the short season that he's had so far, he's definitely proved that he can play in NHL 17. That's for sure.
I definitely think a goaltender can win you any game, really. I mean, it's getting to that point now where the game's been out for a few months now, where people are starting to really realize or figure out little spots in the game that are best for certain player types and stuff like that. I think people are starting to find those the best positioning for certain shots and stuff like that, and maybe how EA likes to treat you where you are sitting on the ice.
Well, if you look at the Checkers roster of goaltenders, Jesus and Trash Clown, who have split the duty so far for the Checkers, decent goaltenders, not bad, but considering the way Tripp is playing, I think that's a nice addition to them. They're able to add, as you mentioned, they're able to get a right D back in Travis, and then of course Jimbo Slice, who. Again, a solid center who will add to that team, and certainly has played very well for them, and is a solid center, good leader, all around, and so I think that helps the Checkers in the long run, and obviously with the the goaltending that the Wolves have, I don't think they needed to to have Tripp on their team, considering that their GM B Nice is not only their GM but one of the best goaltenders in the AHL. I think that goes without saying. So they're certainly dealing from strength. Let's see. I think there are a couple of other goaltenders I wanted to talk about, and we'll get to them right now. Rask, as typical for the Wild, 5-1 this week, 2.83 goals against, 15 saves in a win versus Hershey, 18 saves in beating the Phantoms in a 3-2 victory. Leads the league in wins with 10. He's eighth in shots against with 165. So Rask, typical, getting a lot of work and consistently getting his team in the place where he can win. And I think that's all you can do as a goaltender. A lot of shots against, and continues to help the Wild out tremendously. Now we saw them on Thursday, and they certainly have a team that can score. They've got good offense, and if Rask is in net, I think very much this team is always alive and well. And you guys saw a lot of Rask last year. He's, to me, he's one of the top, easily one of the top five, probably one of the top three goalies in the AHL, and to me, his consistency in net is what one of the shining things that I see, Broski, for Rask. He came in halfway last season and has proven that not only does he belong in the AHL, but he may very well be NHL material come next season.
For sure, I'd have to agree with you there. Rask, even last season though, like during the playoffs, he was on his head for Hartford or Rockford, one of those two teams. he was on his head the whole entire playoffs for them, and a goalie like that can really bring something to the team. Rask is definitely a goaltender that anybody would want on their team, and I could see him in the NHL next season. I really could.
He's definitely a goalie that can steal games. I played a few games against him this year. And yeah, he just stands on his head. Don't understand sometimes how he can get over and make certain saves.
I want to point out two goaltenders that I think have had a really big impact as well.
Mm-hmm.
If you go over to the San Antonio Rampage,
yep.
If you notice their past 5 games, they haven't been really close games except for the one against Utica that they lost. But most games, they've won 8-1, 5-1, 7-2, 5-3. And their goaltenders, I mean, they're doing something right, and I think it's either their defense or their goaltenders are standing on their head. Microwave is one of those goaltenders, and who else is their other goaltender?
Broadway.
And their other Broadway, yes. Yeah. Broadway and Microwave both have been outstanding, especially Broadway, who's 8-2-1. He's killing it in net. Same with Microwave, who's 4-1-1, and they haven't let in a whole lot. And I think that's where a lot of the Rampage success is coming from as well.
Yeah,
they're outstanding goaltenders.
Broadway is 5-0-1 this past week, to a little less than 2.5 goals a game. He faced 83 shots, so he's facing a little over 16.5 shots a game. And as you mentioned, the team was 8-1 this past week with him and Microwave, who had a couple of big wins: 3-2 win against Albany, 4-1 against the Wolves, 7-2 against the Marlies. Those were the last two guys I was going to mention, and that really leads right into why the Rampage have done so well this week. Like I said, going 8-1 in week 2, and you mentioned them, Microwave and Broadway, two goaltenders who got mentioned this week in the power rankings, but it's more than just the numbers they put up. They have helped solidify a goaltending situation in San Antonio, and as long as these guys keep producing, this is going to be a solid team.
Yeah, their offense has been a huge help to that too. I mean, who else's offense is scoring 7-8 goals a game? And if you put up that many goals and your goaltenders are able to stop more than a goal a game, you're doing pretty damn good. And your team is obviously going to start winning a lot of games coming up here, and especially with Freddie up top, and you got guys like Labrat, and they got a pretty good team. If you ask me, I could see them winning a few more games this week. That's for sure.
Yeah. MG, you got a couple of defensemen you want to talk about?
Yeah, definitely. There's a few good guys this week. I think Hershey has got probably two of the best defensemen in the league right now, with Beand and Bestende. I
Right.
think both of them are huge parts of that team and reasons why they're where they are in the standings. I think both of them. I think any team would be happy to have either one of them on their team. So a few guys. I think one guy that played quite a few games for me this year that's just been called up to the NHL, Grenadinator. I think he put up a solid week this week. 3-0-0, 6 points and a +2. I think there's quite a bit of talent on defense this year. I think there's quite a few guys that jumped over to defense this year that are doing pretty well as well.
You know, you look at a little bit of the rankings there for the defense, and as you were talking about, Broski, is it the goaltending? Is it the defense? Well, you know, obviously they have a couple of guys who are highly ranked up there in Braves fan and Vlasic, who are both 3-0 this week for the Rampage, um, and in quantum physics up top in the number 2 spot in the power rankings, 2-0, a +7. You know, again, that's you're seeing that Mayhem. Also got mentioned as well in the power rankings at number 4. So there you go, 4 defensemen from San Antonio in the top 8 of the power rankings. And goaltending, yes, but obviously defense, a big yes as well.
That will do it for a team. All you need. Don't worry before it's anybody. No, but no, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
You get yourself a couple of top defenders, and your team's going to be hard to beat. You need those guys, and defense is hard to come by, especially with the league being short defense this season. I'm pretty sure everybody can feel the pain in certain areas of their team, especially defensive situations when there's not a whole lot of people signed up for defense this season compared to last season in 16.
I think that's a big part of Syracuse's game as well. I mean, if you look at the plus minus in the league for defense, they've got 4 guys in the top 25 plus minus this season, and 2 guys in the top 10, or top 12, anyways, with Drunk Kane and Quickness. Quickness with the +13 and Drunk Kane with a +11, and JM LIGT with a +18. I mean, in 6 games, that wins you games right now if you're not giving up a lot of goals.
We'll go over to the forwards here and quickly, Broski, if there are guys you want to touch on, but obviously some of the guys we normally see up here, Sific at 3-0 this week at a +7, Crippen all day, who's played well, both weeks so far this season. A couple of guys, Galyenchuk, Blind Ref, guys that we've seen, and then some guys here that we know of but haven't had a lot of showing up here, like Brenty Mulligan, who, again, on the rampage, 3-0 this week, 12 points, a +13. Again, probably another big reason why they're doing well. Anybody else here that you want to talk about that stands out as having a nice week for their team?
I mean, I see a lot of the same names as last week, but it's nice to see a few CHL guys up there, especially like the Blind Ref. I know last season he did very well with Hartford and working with Beefy. I mean, he never got a chance to play a whole lot, but I mean, he did well. It's really nice to see some CHL players from last season making it up there and really making a name for themselves. And it's going to be interesting to see how some of these teams like players like John Hardcock played for the Condors TC last season, and he's up there ranked 24th right now. He's 2-4-0, but he's getting the points. He has 10 goals, 10 assists, and he's playing a solid game. So it's really nice to see some CHL players up there making a name for themselves. I'm excited to see how they make the rest of the season go by and see who the top guys are that I guess we just never caught last season.
Yeah, I want to mention Jay Tryhard because he's a guy that I played with a lot in the offseason, and he is really dedicated to trying to play the game the best he can. He plays a lot of drops when he can, or club games when he can, and he was very determined to try and be the best he could before the draft. And the Checkers have him. He had a 3-0 week, 10 points, 6 goals, a +8, and I think his name's apropos because he has been trying hard for a while, and he is now proving that all that work is paying off, and just wanted to mention him because he's number 4 in the power rankings for forward, and deservedly so. Let's move on to some of the topics. We're going to get to the biggest topic last, but right now, the couple of things we want to talk about. First and foremost, we didn't mention last week, and that is please stream your games, but make sure you're archiving them as well if you're doing it through Twitch. We really want to be able to go back and look at these games and find out what you guys did and how you're able to do what you did in your game. Hard to do it when a lot of these games aren't being archived. So please, when you can, make sure you have that taken care of in your Twitch settings. That you have them broadcast archive games and that we're able to then see them. Now, again, they're only going to stay there for a week, but that gives us some time to go look at them before we do the show, and it gives everybody else in the league a chance to do some look-see into how some of the other teams are doing. And this isn't, let's not be Bill Belichick and close your practices to everybody. Uh, it's okay to show your games. No one's gonna figure out something that's gonna keep you scoreless for the rest of the year. So I think it's good for the rest of the league just to be able to have those games archived at least for a little while. Let's talk to you guys quickly about some of the patches and tunes that were done recently. The stick lift, and of course this week the tuner patch, which addressed several of the goaltending issues and some other things. First and foremost, I know we talked about this a little bit, MG, about getting used to the stick lift again and using it. What's been your impression so far of how the stick lift has worked?
I find it hit and miss. I think it also depends on which build you choose. I find certain builds, the stick lift is more effective than other builds. I use two-way defenseman a lot, and I think the improvement has been minor in the stick lift front. I have noticed that the poke check has gotten a little worse, I would say, in certain builds as well,
Right.
where they've tried to improve the stick lift. But overall, I think it's a better patch. I mean, it's not just a penalty button anymore, and that's the main thing.
I love the tuner. I'm not gonna lie, I straight up love the stick lift again. That's all I use. I don't think I poke check anymore unless I'm back checking really hard. But no, I'm enjoying the tuner quite a bit. There's only one thing that I've noticed about the tuner. I don't know if you guys notice this, but the amount of goaltender interference calls or the amount of missed goaltender interference calls is still out there.
Oh yeah.
I've seen in a
100%.
few practice games, the guys just go head first into the goalie and the puck's in the goalie's glove, but goalie gets jumped right through the net.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah,
what are you
yeah.
doing, EA?
Well, I played forward somewhat recently too, and just so I can take runs at the goaltender, just to see what happens. And I've knocked the goaltender like halfway to the sideboards, and kept them there for a few seconds, and have not been called for anything. So I really have a hard time believing any of that's been fixed.
And vice
You know,
versa too, where a goal's getting called off, where I'd be hard pressed to find any goaltender interference on the replay at all, and yet
Right.
Or it
somehow,
was the own team.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think I gotta believe this is pretty much what happens with every update or every tuner. I think they believe they've addressed some of these. How much testing they do on their own is beyond me. But considering when the game came out, couldn't have been too many test cycles done before they were able to put it out there. So I think some of them still have some issues that they have to deal with. Um,
I'm hoping
Go
I'm
ahead.
hoping they do some work to the servers here sooner than later, though. I mean, club games, hopping in them to challenge, you get a lot of freezing. You get a lot of people just white screening. You get a lot of people getting these error code A B B B B B stuff, and I really do hope EA addresses that sooner than later because it can be a make for a real pain in the butt and getting these games going for LG.
Yeah, I've seen in the managers chat there, I've seen guys still talking about getting games going an hour after the game time should have started, and they're still trying to get back and get the game going again. It's just, I think a lot of people had a
ridiculous.
lot of problems this week.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to get on to the our next topic, which is the discussion about management. There's been a lot of discussion again, like I said at the top of the show, about what it's like to manage in the AHL, what some of these guys are going up against, and certainly a lot of players don't necessarily understand everything that goes on in management unless you're actually in management. And I think I found that out this year. It, it is a lot more brutal than I ever thought it was, and I think our next guest kind of hid that from me. Uh, so so I didn't go half cocked off on some people and say, hey, you guys are idiots. But yeah, management is not for the faint-hearted, and here's one guy who not only has done it the first 2 seasons in the AHL for LG, but it now has a team in the NHL. The Arizona Coyotes joining us now, GM Morena Conda. Sir, how are you doing tonight?
Owner.
Owner, sorry.
What's going on, guys?
Well, first, before we get into all the melee, let's talk about your first season in the NHL. And, I got to believe there are differences, good or bad, and you can talk about whatever you want, good or bad. But talk to me about the experience. Hey, at least talk to me about the intensity of the NHL as opposed to the AHL. Do you find it any different? Is there more added pressure on you guys, do you feel?
You know what? I don't feel like there's more pressure because it always seemed like the pressure was coming from above
Mm-hmm.
before.
Right.
So no, now that we're owners, we know what that pressure from above feels like. So, we try and keep that off of of you guys as best we can. And sometimes you can't help it, but as far as the NHL experience goes, I've loved it. I think it's great. Scheduling, I'll tell you right now, is a hell of a lot different in the NHL because I don't know. It just seems like guys can't stick to a schedule and they can't, commit to certain nights. So we're constantly bouncing stuff around, which gets extremely frustrating. But for the most part, I mean, you could definitely tell the gameplay is different for sure. But other than that, man, it's not really that much different. I mean, the thing I've noticed the most is in the NHL, everybody plays really detail-oriented hockey. And if you make a mistake, bam, it's in the back of your net almost every time. So you're constantly, doing your best to keep your game as simple as possible. Get pucks out, get pucks in deep, make sure your passes are clean. That stuff as far as gameplay wise, I've noticed is huge. But then again, I mean, switching back to defense this season has been a totally different beast as well.
Right. Well, and let's keep on that. Obviously, I thought we'd heard a lot of guys say that they were going to switch over. We still have a deficit of defensemen, I think, in this league. But now that you've made the switch, talk to me about what we thought was going to be a nice change in the defensive position in 17. And did that really come to fruition for you in your mind? Is it a better position to play now? And how have you felt about it so far?
I love it. I absolutely love it. And I mean, as a defenseman, first and foremost, you got to accept the fact that, all right, I'm a D-man. It's not my job to go up and score points anymore. It's my job to keep guys to the outside and play the simple game and get the puck up to the forwards and let them go do their job. It's night and day difference between last season, NHL 16 and the previous game and now. I think it's night and day difference. The stick lift being back is huge. I love it. It's working very well. Poke check's still working great. The skating is a lot better. The minor details of the skating that I can't stand in MGM, you can probably attest to this, is picking up speed when you're skating backwards, or when you get caught on your pivot and you're trying to get back into the zone and you pivot and your guy just dies.
Yeah.
And then you got to pivot back the other way and crush it. And by that time he's already by you and you're screaming for help. So
yeah, I find you have to turn off auto back skate. There's no way you can keep it on.
Your guy will just be stuck in the mud the whole game if you do that. But last year you could almost build speed when you skated backwards. You could hit L2 at the right time, and your guy would make this nice little pivot and do a crossover and pick up speed and match the speed of the charging forward. This year it's so much harder to do. You got to
Hmm.
get your speed going, turn around with speed, and hope to be able to keep them in front of you. But I mean, as far as the edge control and stuff, that's so much better. You can start and stop when you're keeping pace with somebody and keep them in front of you a hell of a lot easier than you could last year.
Yeah. And I find the breakouts. I mean, if you're if
Oh
you're
man,
if you're solid and if you know where you want to go, where you want to pass to, the breakouts are just so much better this year.
outstanding.
Yeah.
Outstanding. You can actually get the puck up the ice, and if you get trapped on your own side, you can rim that thing around the boards pretty quickly most of the time. I've had a few times where it's been like, oh God, that almost went in the net, but
That has happened more than a few times. And there's a few times you're trying to ring it around and it throws it right at the goalie for whatever reason. But,
yeah, that one gets frustrating. But I mean, if you got a nice look at it, you can zip that thing around the boards. So, and getting shots off in the offensive zone is a hell of a lot quicker this season. You can just turn and burn a wrist shot immediately, which is great. So I mean, all in all, I think I love it. As a defenseman, you have to accept the fact that you're a D man. Like I said before,
Right.
you have to just take the role on and be a defenseman and not worry about scoring points. Some guys do, and that's their game. But for me personally, I think you play the simple game. You get pucks in deep, you get pucks out of your own zone safely, and you move on with your day.
Well, let's now tackle the topic of management in the AHL and NHL and how the two levels coexist. I mean, we certainly could talk about the CHL as well, but I think we know how badly they get screwed. So let's. I think I think I think we're all on board with that. That could be the CHL job can certainly be incredibly tough, but
This should be the last season of that, though.
well, you'd
We'll
hope
keep our
so.
fingers
Yeah,
crossed.
exactly. If you know anybody who plays defense and doesn't play this league, sign them up because it definitely could use a lot more guys like that. Um, there were quite a few things that I don't want to get into details about this week, but there has been chatter for several weeks now about several AHL GMs and AGMs who tell stories of not having much or any input as to what goes on with their team, or have to go through some clearance with the GM at all times for any possible trade or pickup. They're guys who definitely who are definitely well trusted by their NHL management, and certainly guys who have come to realize that they're not going to have any input, and guys who have quit because of that. Um, it's a really touchy subject to talk about, but it's one that I think we
It
need to
is.
talk about because I think, and the reason why, and I said this at the top of the show, Moran, I think, I brought you on not because we know you really well, but it's because I know that you understand what it's like to be an AHL GM. You know what you have to deal with ownership and management on the NHL level, and you and Vihai are incredibly sensitive towards that, and always try and make sure that you're fact finding. You're trying to get information from me and Broski as to, okay, you want to do this, tell us, bounce it off us, and we'll let you know if we think it's a good idea or not. And that's the role that you guys have taken as just trying to be consultants. And I'm not saying that that's absolutely the right thing to do. I think it is for us, but it may not be for every team. But I feel like there are many guys here who are in management who in the AHL will not go back to be management next season because of this. And I think we're going to lose a lot of good guys because of how this is happening. Do your experience as an AHL GM and talking to other AHL GMs the last two seasons, has this always been a problem? Is this always, a complaint that we see every day in the chat, in the management chat, or does this to you sound like it's really ramped up more for this season?
Um, it's always been there. It's always been there. Like You always hear it. We always heard it last year in the season before that. You know, and it sucks. You know, I mean, honestly, that's the only way I can put it is that, you know, I wouldn't want to do that. I mean, because I've heard some stories about GMs not having any say over their roster in the AHL, and the owner up top does everything. And that's just not fair. I mean, why even have management at that point? You know, you got to have guys that you can trust down there. I mean, it's an organization. This isn't just your ECU squad down in the AHL that you just pick the best players that are going to be the best ECUs for you and fill in the blanks with the rest of whoever. And that's not the way it works. It's an organization top to bottom. This is in my view. This is the way it should be. I mean, you got to let your guys do their thing in the AHL, man. I mean, we don't say, oh no, don't make that move, or you're not allowed to trade this guy, or you're not allowed to do that, or I'm getting this guy and putting him on your, some things have happened here and there where we've been like, okay, we got this one guy coming in and, but we haven't been like, okay, now you're bidding on this guy, you're bidding on, if anything, we stepped off, we had a guy that we were bidding on in the AHL that we wanted. And we saw at one point, we were like, okay, this is going to handcuff our AHL team. This is going to put them in a bad spot. So we backed off and we were like, all right, let's just let them do their thing. We can figure something else out. And I don't want to put them in a bad spot like that. And we backed off. And there's teams out there that won't back off. They'll just go and spend $12 million on somebody, which is half of your cap in the AHL. And then you're basically sacked at that point, man. You have no chance. So, I mean, there's got to be a give and take between ownership and management from top to bottom. There has to be, and sometimes communication is tough. I mean, because there's a lot going on. Like literally, I work from the time I get up in the morning until the time I go to bed at night. I am always on the website. I'm always looking at stuff. I'm always talking to people on Skype, on the website. Literally, it's all day, every single day.
If you want to have that out there for your employer to hear.
Hey, it is what it is. I do it in my downtime.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, there's got to be a give and take, man. You can't just force your AHL guys into doing things. It's just not fair to them because they put in that much time.
Right.
I mean, if you're putting in that much time in a day to your team and then all of a sudden you make what you think was a good move and then you're getting reamed for it, or next thing you know, one of your favorite players or one of your best players is gone from your team because the NHL needed this or that. That's just not fair, man. There's got to be a give and take from top to bottom. And I can understand and see why people are getting frustrated.
Do you have any, on the flip side, do you have any NHL management that gets frustrated with their AHL management and how they run things?
Oh, for sure. It's,
Sure.
You see it every day. I mean, I can't, go into detail or anything on it, but you definitely see
it's
it.
most likely about Broski.
No, not at all.
No,
You guys are awesome. Like I said, man, I think we have the best management group in the AHL, and I believe that. And I take offense to the fact that you said I kept stuff from you, Sibs. It's not that much work, man. Seriously. First season, I was overwhelmed with it, man. I really was. I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? Ripping my hair out that I had left on my head and going gray because of it. But I've kind of found a niche or a groove, I guess, to where it's just part of my daily routine now. So, but yes, you do see it from top to bottom. You see NHL teams talking about, no, I can't believe what they're doing, or they're, filling their roster with prospects, and which I can get that one, because if you got a roster full of prospects down in the AHL, and this happened to us personally in season 1, where we weren't even thinking about it. We were just trying to improve our roster and get better players in there and get things going because we had a rough start, and we did that. But lo and behold, halfway through the season, I get a message from ownership, and they're like, hey, man, like, what are you doing? I'm like, what do you mean? We're kicking ass here. We just climbed out of dead last place, and we're sitting in 4th place in the interconference now. What do you mean, what am I doing? And they're like, your roster's full of prospects, man. We can't call anybody up if we needed to. And I was like, oh, my God. I didn't even think about it.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't even cross my mind. And once they told me that, I was like, oh man, yeah, I see what you're saying. You can't call anybody up if you need to. And at a certain point in the NHL, I mean, you're kind of just like, it's bizarre because you only have your 17 guys. That's all you have.
Right.
You have no fallbacks. You have nothing. So if something goes awry, you have your 17 guys and your 3 draft picks. And that's it to move. And you don't have all those training camp guys and stuff that you can move and create something out of nothing with. So, you got to have those guys who are able to be called up in the AHL up to the NHL, which is good. So word to the wise to anybody out there who is in the AHL, just make sure you don't fill your rosters with prospect players, because I'm sure your owners will get disappointed about it. But on the other hand, man, I could see it from both sides. I think some of the stuff that's being done is extremely unfair to some of these guys, and it's just not cool. I don't like the way that some of the stuff's being run. Some of the comments that I saw before bidding, to where teams didn't even give their GMs capabilities to make bids. I mean, why do you even have them?
Yeah, I just don't get it. I mean, these people are volunteering to do this because they don't want to be a figurehead. They don't want to sit there and have everybody else do the work for them. They're there because they want to be involved. And if you give them the idea that they're going to be involved and then pull it out from underneath them, it's just that's a scum move. I just don't get it. And Broski, look, you've been around in management long enough here as well. Same question that I asked Mike. Is this it? You've been in these chats. Is there more going on this year, or is this just like any other season? I'm just noticing it for the first time.
I I think more so this season. I got to be right honest with you. I see it way more this season than I did last season. And I've been one of those lucky GMs where, life hasn't been completely miserable for me. I mean, I've had 2 amazing owners both last season with Oso Sick. One of the easiest guys to work with. Same with this year with Moran and Khan. I do got to say, it's kind of nice being able to do whatever I want, when I want, how I want. And, of course, I go back in the chat and I'm saying, hey, this is what I'm looking at doing. I mean, nobody's ever told me no. Whereas I see in the chat, Guttino quitting since, he has no control over anything. And there's other people that's done the same thing because, like, their NHL owners are like, nope, this is what you're doing. You're going to sit there, you're going to take stats, you're going to put stats in, and then you're going to get your lineups together and do my dirty work. And then, I'll call people up as I please or whatever. And it's just not fair to AHL. I mean, okay, I understand, the NHL teams are definitely, you're going to have those guys that quit or request a trade and you're going to need fillers. But I don't think your whole AHL squad should be somebody that you want.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a give and take, man. You got to give guys, I would never, I just, like I said, man, when we all came together as one, it's a give and take. We're all on the same team. You know what I mean? And it's, like the situation we're in right now, and we're not afraid to say it. We got a D spot that needs filled, but, we've kept a guy down there for you guys. I don't think any other team, do you guys think another team would do that? Or you think they just be like, screw you guys, we're taking them?
I gotta say, 100%. I already know no other team probably has done this yet, and if you have, then fucking destroy my DMs. I don't even care. I don't think there's another team out there that actually leaves a guy down in the AHL for 2 weeks and ECU the player, just so I'm not getting screwed over, or not screwed over, just because I couldn't find a guy. Yet,
spot. Yeah.
I don't think there's any other team right now in the league that's ever done that and ever will do that.
I mean, why would you not? It's a partnership, man. We're both here to succeed,
Exactly.
From top to bottom. And if we take a guy and that puts you in a bad spot, when we have the option of leaving him there and just figuring it out for a little bit, why would you not just figure it out?
I mean, you have 8 ECUs for a reason. You can ECU a guy for 8 times for a reason. And I feel like the ECUs were in place for this reason right here, being, for being in trouble.
Right. I mean, it makes logistical sense to me, to not screw over the AHL team, because they're just as important as the NHL team. I don't care what anybody says. In the AHL world, that season is your world, man. You're going for the cup. You're trying to get to the playoffs and you're trying to get it done. And the last thing you want is somebody snatching stuff away from you and saying tough shit.
everybody's goal in the end is to win the prize possession, even though it's not a whole lot in this virtual league. But still, everybody's goal in the end is to be able to look on their trophies and see that they've won the Stanley Cup, the Calendar Cup, or
Right.
some form of recognition.
That's the whole point, man, is that's the way we feel about it. And I wish more people felt like about it, that it's a partnership. It's an organization. It's
Right.
not the NHL and the AHL. It's an organization top to bottom.
So,
And I feel bad for teams that don't have that.
so with all that in mind, and yeah, I'm gonna leave this as the last question on this, and try and wrap it up. But with all that in mind, give me your idea of at least one thing that that the league should think about doing in order to get that kind of autonomy, to give the AHL management the power to do what they need to without a lot of interference. Obviously, they've got to, in a perfect world, you want the NHL and the AHL management to work together and to help each other out. It is few and far between. We all know that. There are very few teams that really have that mindset. So, besides, step one, which is to find better management who actually give a shit about their AHL team and not just what we do for our team. Besides that, what could we legislate in that might get us more towards that power that the AHL management needs? I want to start with Broski first, and then MG, and then Moran on this.
That's a very tough question. I'd love to say make an owner for an AHL team and go on like that there, but then I feel like it wouldn't work, because then the NHL would be like have nobody to contact for like owners like Moran or like Oso or guys that I don't know what other owners out there do this, but like actually communicate and give people leeway on what they can and can't do. So ownership wouldn't, or having an ownership of the AHL wouldn't work unless they could find a way around it to make it work.
MG,
What about you, MG?
any thoughts on that?
I think maybe just more specific guidelines as to what the roles are and who has what say. Certain things that both parties can and can't do. I think if there's just a guideline that both parties can abide by, I think that would make things a lot easier for everybody.
It's a great question, Sibs. I mean, what can we do?
Mhm.
I mean, I really don't have anything off the top of my head that could improve the situation other than the giant elephant in the room that is find better ownership. But, that's easier said than done. We all know that from what we've seen happen 2 weeks into the season already, and the amount of owners or whatever that have changed or dropped out or did this or did that. So, I would definitely like to see somehow more of a forced partnership, I guess. You shouldn't be able to tell AHL managers, okay, you're not allowed to have bidding capabilities.
Right.
I mean, that just you shouldn't
Yeah.
be able to do that.
That's absolutely ridiculous.
I mean, your AHL managers should be there to manage the team and do their thing. You got guys that were out there spending weeks scouting players, and then weeks getting books on guys, and then when it comes time to bidding, they pop open their bidding board and they've already got like 3/4 of the team being bid on, and none of their guys are being bid on, and they're like, okay, so what just happened? So I think that definitely, I would almost specifically say that owners aren't allowed to bid in the AHL. They're allowed to consult and let guys know, who they want and talk about it. It would force them to communicate about it.
Right.
But just because I know how frustrating that is, from season 2. We had guys getting bid on our thing, and we were like, well, what the hell, man? These aren't the guys we wanted. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, we have these guys that are still being bid on and other guys that we wanted to bid on. and we can't bid on them because we're maxed out on our 9 forwards or we're maxed out on our 6D. And, 3/4 of those guys aren't guys we even wanted. And by the time those high bids ran out and we didn't even get those players in the first place, those guys that we wanted had already expired and gone to other teams.
Right.
Here's the thing that I've heard. I've seen it talked around, and I think it might create a lot more work for the Bogs. I don't know if they want any more work, but I've heard some people talking about maybe a virtual agreement where both the owner and the GM from the AHL team agree on one, like they send a big message to the Bog before the season starts of what their expectations are, what agreements they have, if like the owner's bidding on the team,
contract,
if the GM,
exactly.
contract. That's exactly the word I can think of because I'm broski. But like a virtual contract that they both have to agree to in a message to all the Bogs, and the Bogs, keep that message saved. And if there's a time during the season where one of these, the owner or the GM, feels like this contract's been breached, then there's a penalty or something that happens. I don't know what happens, but something that happens.
Right. No, I think that's a great idea.
And out for the GM on the AHL team. A lot of guys that are being forced to take season bans because their GM or their owner is totally screwing them over. I mean, in that instant, he's got an out where he doesn't have to take a ban and he can step down from the position.
His GM
I think that's a fantastic idea, honestly, because that would give you job security. That would give you an out if the guys weren't adhering to that contract, and you could provide proof of that, because I'm sure they track any bids or trades or anything that are made. I think that's a great idea. Come up with some sort of a virtual contract that you can both agree to in a PM on the site. Something like that I think could help with the situation quite a bit and really help to create the partnership that needs to be there for the organization as a whole.
Yeah, and in the end, I agree with you. It was the exact thing I was thinking as well, and that is some sort of a contract that is through the site, that as you're checking off things, it also adjusts settings for the NHL management, what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do, whatever you agree upon. Because in the end, if we have good management people who want to do this in the AHL, we can't be fucking them over by sticking them with NHL management that says, don't worry about it. You're going to have all the control. And then come draft day, come making lineups and making trades, they have no control at all, and there's no recourse for it. If we want people who are responsible, who are going to do a good job in this league in management and make this league better because of that, which is what will happen if you get better guys in management. This league is going to become a lot better. It's going to not only have better players, but better individuals who are part of this league, and this league will start getting taken a lot more seriously because we're not having a bunch of immature jackasses deciding that they're going to be emperor of the league, and of their organization. And we have to get away from those guys. And the only way you're going to do that is if you hold them accountable like an adult, whether they're 25 or 15. You have to hold them accountable for their actions. And what better way than to have a contract that is trackable through the site? That's a lot of work. Obviously, it's good. It would be a lot of coding and whatever to get it done. But these verbal agreements or an agreement through the website saying, I'll be happy to be GM, isn't enough, because these guys on the other end are not keeping their promise. The other part of it too is a lot of the guys who took management in the AHL. I wonder how much due diligence they made with the NHL guys. Did they ask all the right questions? Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Did they ask all the right questions? Did they get a sense? Or did they get it? Somewhere in messaging that yes, we're going to give you this, and then because someone like Gatineau could probably go back and say, hey, here are all the messages that I had from them that said they were going to let me do this, and then they didn't. And so,
exactly.
You have to, if you're going to get involved in management, if there aren't going to be rules like this, my advice to you would be get all the communication you can with your NHL.
Diligence.
Yeah, and know where you stand with them, have record of where you stand with them, and then if you get screwed over, just go to the league and say, look, this is what they promised and this is what's not happening.
I mean, you could take it completely out of the league's hands and just draw, put it on the shoulders of the owners. Be like, look, this is part of your duty as an owner
Yeah.
is to draw up a contract with yourself and your management in both the NHL and the AHL. That way we have it in writing. We have it via a PM on the site. You could draw it right up. So number one, you would have to make sure that owner was responsible enough to actually get that done. So there's criteria for an owner right there. And to draw that up and get it signed and get it submitted to the league on it by a certain deadline before the season starts. All those checks and balances would have to be in place. And like we said, guys, I mean, right now we're still in the infancy of the PlayStation Network side. So, hopefully we can get it out there and get more people to join and more people to be in this league and more responsible people to be in this league that actually care about their organization from top to bottom and wouldn't want to throw their AHL under the bus.
All right, well, listen, Miranda Conda, again, thank you for coming on tonight, for talking to us. Obviously, Broski and I wish you the best of luck. I think MGM does.
I do as well, yes.
There's a possibility.
Yeah.
Congratulations, by the way, on your successful week, Moran.
Well, it's one
Nice seeing
week,
the Yotes being able to do something in season 3. It only took 3 seasons for them to get good management.
We'll see how it goes here. We still got 7 weeks to go.
All right, sir. Well, you take it easy. We'll talk to you again soon, and I'm sure I'll be on your show, wreaking havoc and making fun of Vihai as usual.
Absolutely, boys. It was a pleasure to come home for a little bit here, and I just want to say to everybody in the AHL, man, keep grinding, and we'll see you soon.
All right, that's Miranda Conda. Thanks again, buddy. Talk to you soon.
Sounds good, guys.
Miranda Conda from the Arizona Coyotes with us tonight, and again, a lot of good ideas that I think I think maybe we'll throw that in a poll next week. I was just making a note for myself. Should there be a contract between NHL and AHL management as to what AHL management is going to be able to do? And I think I don't think it's a bad idea, guys. MG, how do you feel about something like that? Does that make sense?
Oh, 100% makes sense. I mean, there are certain guys out there that want to run the teams, and if they can find a GM that is fine with that, then I don't have a problem. I think the main problem is having guys that don't aren't just no communication going into the season, and no understanding of what their role is really going to be. So I think it's a perfect solution for a problem that we're having this year.
Sounds like it made sense to you too, Broski.
Definitely. I don't know what else to say, honestly. I think a virtual contract would work out for a lot of people in their favors, because I'm sure some of these guys that got 3 season bans definitely don't want to be out of this league, but want to be a part of it still. But unfortunately, it just didn't work out for them.
All right, guys. Well, listen. Thanks again for another great show. We will be getting ready now to get some practice in and get ready for week number 3. I think I asked last week, what you're looking for week number 2. I think I've come to realize there's really not anything to look for other than wins, because because it's so unpredictable the first few weeks with all the moves, and to me that's kind of one of the toughest things in management, is to, at least for the first couple of weeks, is getting your team settled down. So I mean, to me, that's the only thing I look for. I look for is, we get into that point where we're settling into a squad that we're comfortable moving forward with. I mean, that to me is the only thing I think is relevant in the first couple of weeks.
Well, and I think both of us, Tucson and Stockton, I mean, we both had pretty much blank slates going into this season. It's not like we had a few guys signed to contracts from years before where we had a bit of a core. We started with basically nothing, so it definitely can take a little bit of time to get those guys all gelled and working together as a team.
Right. All right, gentlemen. Well, I will talk to you next week. Good luck with your team, MG, and I think we see you later on this week. I don't
I
know
believe
if
so.
don't know if I actually am in that game or not, but
I don't know if I put myself there, but I think I need to get some redemption.
That's right. Yeah.
Anyways,
Tuesday.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot. We'll talk to you sometime next week, obviously.
Sounds good.
All right, that's MGM and Broski here on AHL This Week. T-Sib saying so long. Have a good week number 3, and let's hope nobody else quits, because we need good guys in management as long as we can get them. Everyone have a good week.